Hey, Steve Mignogna here doing the junkyard crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardstown, Massachusetts with a 1940 Dodge Luxury Liner. When this car was built, Dodge was 26 years into business, starting in 1914. And this car today in 2023 is 84 years old. You got to remember, only 30 years after this was built in 1970, cars like the Charger Daytona and the Super Bee were the rage, but it all kind of started right here. Some folks call this the potato, but for 1939 and 40, this is the second year for a total revolution in Dodge, chassis and body style, everything really. At the front of this thing, we'll start there. 1940 was the first year for sealed beam headlights. 1939, these would have been a bulb inside of a reflector, but we see right here, there's the universal three-prong light, which is still in use, well, in certain cars today. And again, there would have been a sealed beam light that would have gone right in here. It's the remains of one of them here. And there it is. 1940 was also the first year for universal use of the Ram logo on Dodge vehicles, first seen in 1934. Now you got to remember that the Ram is the ancient sort of symbol for the Aries creature. And by the way, Aries is Latin for Ram. And of course, Ram is also an ancient symbol for virility and strength. So again, the Dodge brothers, or Dodge I should say, starting in 34, started to use the Ram symbol long before the truck line of today, the Dodge Ram and the Ram vehicles. So again, started in 34, but well along in 1940 when this thing was built. Now it still has 16-inch wheels. 15s would arrive in 1948, but 16-inch wheels. Interesting to see here, nuts and studs. In the 50s, Chrysler went to bolt-on wheels, so they kind of went this way and that way. But something seen on all 1940 Dodges is the very same engine. This is a 218 cubic inch flathead with 87 romping, stomping horsepower. There it is right there. And again, this was the one and only engine. There were no 413s, no 383s, none of that stuff. It was all the same engine. This one does have the optional dual horns, electric horns on this one here. The coil is built into the firewall, kind of a typical thing of the day. This one does have a Ramcharger hood scoop, but not the kind you'd find on a 70 Super Bee, but rather this on the cowl, which lifts to bring air into the cockpit or the cabin to cool off the folks inside. Now this is a magazine article or an ad from 1939 Dodge Luxury Liner, as they called it right here. My friend Dave Plant gave this to me. But new for 39 and continued in this 40 is independent front suspension, replacing the leaf springs and the beam axle seen in 1938. Kind of a big deal. Individual action front suspension, all new coil springs. And of course, the front, of course, they're talking here in 39. Sealed beams were used in 40. These still have bulbs. This is a 39. It's a cousin of this car. But again, the 38s, the headlights would have been in pods sitting on top of the fenders. So again, for 1939 and this 1940, big changes in streamlining. You got to remember that the Chrysler Airflow and DeSoto Airflow and Imperial Airflow of 34, 5, and 6 were distant memories. Now, Dodge and Plymouth never went Airflow, but the styling, the streamlining absolutely trickled on over, down, up, whatever, to mainstream Dodges like this one. Now, something we see on this one is suicide doors. A lot of folks think that, well, Lincoln Continental, the only American car with suicide doors. No, all Dodge four-doors had this through 48. Open the front door and the back door, and voila, big time access to the inside of the car. Big seats, room totally for 3 full-sized adults in the back and the front. But again, with 87 horsepower, you're not going to go too fast in a car like this. But keep in mind, the Eisenhower interstate highway system hadn't happened yet, so average road speeds would have been 40, maybe 45 at this point in time. Now, up here we can see this one is radio equipped, and a little interesting detail on that is this is Floyd Clymer's Automotive Trade Journal from October of 1934. Right here's the big fat cat and the guy trying to buy the car, etc. But inside, there's a story here on the future of aftermarket radio. And here it is right here. $16 million in radio profits. And it says here, will the motor car and radio become a factory equipment job in 1935? And it is true. About 1935, Detroit car makers started building the stereo or the radio into the car. That picture there, it's a 34 Airflow DeSoto, which could be had with a factory radio. But a lot of cars, you still got your radio from a radio seller. And this is telling the world that, hey, don't worry, you can still get your share of profits by selling the aftermarket radio. And we can see on that top right picture, the old school, that's a 1929 installation. That's the speaker. Looks like a telephone piece, but that's a 1929 car radio. And they're saying here that radio manufacturers look on the 1934 season as consuming 1 million car radio sets compared to 724,000 in 33 and only 134,000 in 32. So while radios today are everywhere, back in 1934, Floyd Climer's Automotive Trade Journal was telling people, hey, there's still room to sell radios. And again, aftermarket radios were usually under the dash, whole different thing than these integrated radios, which came from the factory. By 1940, factory installed radios were kind of a normal thing. Getting back to 1939, this again is a 39 Dodge Luxury Liner ad. We can see right here, basically the same thing as the 40, but right here, see this little thing right here, the speedometer. It says, take a look at the new safety light speedometer. As the artist composite sketch indicates, a lighted bead on the moving dial glows green at speeds up to 30 and then red beyond 50, etc. We look at this speedometer and there it is. We can see right here that little bead right there. That is the thing that they're talking about. So safety and vehicles, not new in the 70s. It was actually quite the thing back in 1940 as well. Now this one's a 3-speed manual. There's the shifter up in the column. In 1939, the year before this car was built, was the first year for the column shift. Previous to that, would have been on the floor, right in the middle of the front seat passengers. No automatic or even fluid drive till you get into 1941. Now under the dash on this one, we can see the deluxe airflow heater. That's a Chrysler item. And that term airflow is a reference to the soon to be forgotten Turkey, the 1934 Chrysler and DeSoto airflow. But clearly Chrysler wasn't afraid to use the term on their heater, whereas the airflow automobiles were sales disasters. Anyway, we go back. And here's the back seat, kind of an interesting right here. There's another 1939 ad. I couldn't find anything from 1940, but this is pretty darn close. And that picture on the left says, take a look, T for 2 is perfectly possible in the new 27-inch larger luggage compartment. Unlike the old trunk-style compartments, it's completely concealed. Let's take a peek at that. Look at the kids in the trunk. I wonder if that's a good idea or not, but maybe it tells us where the kids ended up. Let's go to the back on this one, close that door, and look at the pop-out rear windows, not just for 68 Super Bs, folks, right there, kind of cool. And then what they're talking about here is unlike 1938 and earlier where the trunk was sort of an add-on feature, optional, not always standard, by 1940 and 39, it was baked into the shape of the car, the contour at the back. Let's see if the kids are in here. 5, 4, 3, 2. I guess the kids are gone. That's cool. But anyway, we see under here, yeah, the trunk floor kind of rotted out. But this is body on frame construction. You can see on the right-hand side the spare tire well, even the mount for it. And if we can zoom in on that leaf spring, you'll see it's kind of covered with some weird stuff. Well, that's a wrap, probably lead, not sure, but the leaf springs would have been wrapped up in that. They call them gators, and what you would do is fill that with grease so the leaf springs wouldn't squeak. In later years, Teflon inserts between the leaves took care of the squeaking and the gator was gone. But here we have it on this 1940. And let's see, oh yeah. But again, we have the Ram logo here. For the first time, replacing the Star of David, which was sometimes used in 1939 earlier on Dodge vehicles, but the Ram again, the Greek sign, I think Aries, which of course Latin for Ram. Kind of cool to see right here. The tail lamps are glass, not plastic, kind of cool with a little clear piece here to sort of accentuate perhaps the illumination at night. And you know, gasoline theft, a big deal in the 1970s when OPEC happened, but in 1940, here's a locking gas cap right here. A little key goes in there, keep people from snatching your gasoline. Coming down the sides, you know, body on frame, but bolt-on fenders, no built-in fenders till 1953, I think it was, for Dodge, which was good and bad. If these get a little fender bender, you unbolt that fender, spray it, replace it, no big deal. When it's built into the car, you got some welding and cutting to do. Up along here, let's take a peek, open the door, and here's that speedometer with the safety bead, that little light thing right there, which tells you if you're going too fast or not. That illuminates. And again, no safety glass on this to speak of. This stuff does not crystallize. Rather, this can slice you up pretty good. Now, there's a false beginning, if you will. There's a plastic layer between the inner and outer. We can see it's delaminating with that bubble, but this is pretty nasty stuff if you go through the windshield. And these cars didn't have seat belts. In fact, seat belts weren't even a thing in 1940, unless you're in an airplane. But getting back to that radio, how did they get reception? Well, factory radio, factory antenna. These little studs right here, that's where the little mast would have gone right there to pick up the Pearl Harbor attack or whatever Tommy Dorsey might have been on the radio that particular day. So that's the story of 1940. This is, again, an 84-year-old Dodge. You know, I'm 58 myself, so it's hard to imagine this thing is not that old when I was born. Now an 84-year-old car seems like a million years old. But again, you know, now we have the brand new 2004 Dodge Charger, Daytona, Fratzog, electric, whatever you want to call that car, and how far Dodge has come. But they still have four wheels, and they still move down the road. So are they that different? Yeah, but anyway, that's the story of 1940, the Dodge Luxury Liner. First with full floating power, the engine mounts on the front and the back, and 3-speed manual transmissions. No automatics quite yet, but a very cool car and a very comfortable car. If you like this video, be sure to share it with your friends, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to Steve Maggs YouTube channel, and hit the bell so you're aware of the next video which comes out tomorrow morning.